Montessori is about following the child, right? So why is it that every time we think, okay, this is so simple, we're just going to follow our child and everything will work out, we find ourselves lost?
Hmm.
Like, how exactly does one follow the child? Like, do
Hmm.
we literally meander with them as they're wandering? Do we just let them do whatever they want?
Yeah.
Are we supposed to be doing anything while we're following, or are we literally just, letting them take the lead on everything? And what parents find is that when you do just kind of take that passive back seat and you just wander along behind your child and let them do whatever they want and just continually cater to them, there is trouble that happens. And that trouble is in the form of not your child experiencing joy and having a great time, because they will,
Sure.
but boredom happens. Your child doesn't always keep that steady stream of energy and interest, and parents end up feeling like, I just keep, helping my child with what they're interested in, but now they're not interested in anything.
Yeah, it's a really common problem, right? I think if you're here with us, unless you just stumbled upon the channel, in which case, welcome.
Yay!
But if you're watching a Montessori Power Hour show, you're probably trying to honor your child's independence, or
For
you're at
sure.
least thinking about it, right?
That's
It's
right.
somewhere in your mind. You're like, I know I'm supposed to follow the child, or I want my child create. I want their creativity to come through. So what do we want to do? We want to step back, right? Not always a bad thing. We want to give them the freedom, and then nothing happens, right? We're just
Or
waiting
your
and waiting
child
and waiting.
just continues to play with trains for hours and hours and hours, day after day after day, and nothing else happens, and you're like, wait a minute, I thought there would be more,
Yeah, and so I
right?
think this is when we've talked about this in the past in other episodes. I think this is when we get into the materials trap, right? We think that if we
Could be,
buy the
yeah.
right kinds of materials,
Mhm.
then the magic will happen, right? Oh, okay, that's the thing I'm missing.
Or we get into the unschooling trap where we're
Mm,
like, okay, like, so we're not schooling, we're doing the opposite of schooling. So what does that mean? No materials are necessary, or no instruction
yeah.
is necessary. And it really does. It sounds great. It's great underlying advice. Maria Montessori herself talked about it all the time. We talk about it in our primary course, and in this beautiful section she wrote called A Planet, what is it, A Planet Without
Yeah.
Schools?
Yeah.
Where she makes the case essentially for unschooling. But then when you dig deeper into her work, you find she's not actually recommending that adults don't do anything.
That's right.
She is just saying it is within the nature of every single child to want to learn, to have that desire to learn, and to be ready if the right environment and the right nurturing is there, right?
Yeah,
So I
totally.
think like those are the things, like, what is that right environment and the right nurturing? Where's that balance between being too micromanaging and just totally hands off?
Yeah, so that's what we want to talk about today. And if you are live with us, welcome, welcome. We're so happy to have you. We'd love to hear your comments and thoughts, as always, in the chat as we're
Mhm.
going along. But, this is one of those big misconceptions. As I think about it, um, when we talk about following the child, it's so simple sounding, right?
Mm,
And yet super deceptive, right? In fact, it's deceptively simple sounding.
right.
And I do think it leads to a number of outcomes. I think one outcome is we then put too much faith in the materials.
Hmm.
And I think that's where the kind of materials obsession comes from in a part.
Mm.
I think we put too much faith in a didactic curriculum.
Uh-huh.
So I think that's where we then fall into like, well, it's not working. The materials aren't enticing them. So I must need more structure, which may be the case, but then that sometimes or often can look like, and now we're going to work through these workbooks or these folders or something and have a very prescriptive
Hmm.
method. That's not following the child, but it's a logical reaction to
Yeah.
my kid just keeps going back to the Legos. I spent all that money on the materials. Another reaction I think is a logical outcome is like, oh well, there's a bunch of people out there who are telling me that it's actually okay that my kid's just kind of doing whatever they want all the
Hmm.
time. So I guess that's valid too. And, we're not, I'm a man of peaceful intentions. I have love for all, but there are certain educational philosophies that I don't think work quite as well. And especially when taken to an extreme. And I think that can be, you can find that in unschooling.
Radical unschooling.
Radical unschooling. And I would have the same criticism for people who go radical curriculum
Curriculum.
focus, right? Neither one of
That's
those,
right.
they're both extremes, and neither one of them is necessarily going to work for most kids,
Yeah.
right? But you might, as the parent, find comfort in them because they can feel like a justification, right? Like I can justify that I'm homeschooling by making sure they're completing these books. Or I can justify that I'm not homeschooling in the way that society expects by saying, well, actually, I have a label and it's this. And neither one of those is necessarily following the child. In fact, neither one of those is following the child. Let me clarify. You're not following the child if
You
you're doing
can't
that.
follow a curriculum and a child at the same time.
And you can't just give the child complete total free reign and expect and be following the child either. The child is growing and learning. Your responsibility as the home educator, as any educator, as the parent, is to create a nurturing, positive, loving, creative, inspirational environment. So it's not to say, when we say follow the child, we don't mean follow them over the cliff, right? And we also don't mean like follow them by actually putting them in a harness and saying, now you all walk this way, now you all walk this way, and I'm walking behind you, right? That's not following either. It's something totally different.
Yeah, now Maria Montessori believed that children should have a lot of freedom in their educational environment.
Yeah.
They should be free to make choices about what kinds of things interest them and to what in terms of like what they actually want to focus on or concentrate on. So children have a lot of freedom in that. And children were also really encouraged to be free to move. And that actually is still not really true in a lot of traditional education settings, maybe the exception of some preschools.
Yep.
But like once you get into elementary school or like kindergarten and beyond, children are really kind of expected to be still a lot. Even in a lot of preschools, they're expected to be still a lot. You can just look into a classroom and see whether the classroom is set up for movement or not. And if you see like one of those little rugs with a little dot on each one, like evenly spaced apart, those children are going to be doing some sitting. But Maria Montessori believed children should have the freedom to move around and be themselves, the freedom to like be their own unique person. But with one caveat that true freedom cannot come also without boundaries around it.
Yes.
And she even said, I have a beautiful quote here. It's from The Observant Mind. It says, to let the child do as he likes when he has not yet developed any powers of control is to betray the idea of freedom. And so this is something that we can really play with as Montessorians and as parents. The idea of like, what are those powers of control? So, and I imagine, because Maria obviously like was around a lot of 2.5 and 3-year-olds who maybe have not yet developed the power of control not to throw things, right? So you've got your 2-year-old, your 2.5-year-old who is presented with a beautiful pink tower, and what do they want to do with it? Like pick it up and chuck it. That would be an example of, is it inappropriate to develop the gross motor skills of throwing?
Sure.
No, but what is the appropriate thing to do that with? A sock or a ball or, something that's soft, that's not going to cause damage to the item itself or another person.
Yes.
Maybe something purposeful too, the
right.
hoop to throw it into or the laundry basket to chuck it into. A block being thrown across the room is just damaging and destructive and potentially dangerous.
Yeah, and it's not setting a good model for respect, right? Because that's a big part of it as well, is that you're wanting to teach a sense of respect. And so when we talk about following the child, and we're going to dig into this in a minute, but it occurs to me that part of it is teaching the child self-respect. And so what does self-respect look like? It means, to me, I'd be curious if we have other thoughts out there, but for me, self-respect isn't just loving whatever I do at all times, right? Because that can be some pretty bad behaviors, right? I love smoking and I'm going to smoke 100 cigarettes a day. Self-respect. Like, no, we all know that's wrong. Like, no, no, no. Not a good idea.
Okay.
Right? There is some sense of, you like that analogy? You like that
It's a
example?
great thing to bring up on a children's show.
Listen, don't smoke, boys and girls. Everybody knows that. That's why it's a bad example. You can't do that. It's
Okay,
not
so
healthy for you. And self-respect would be to respect who you are,
yeah.
but in a way that's not destructive, right? And so to understand the sense of like destructiveness is a part of it as well. And
Mm.
some of that destructive is like this kind of toxic poison you might introduce into yourself. Like, I'm going to eat nothing but candy. You like that example better?
Or even verbal, if your inner dialogue is all like very self-shamey, or
Yes.
you're constantly feeling guilt and like you're not enough and criticizing yourself. If that inner critic is like too
Yes.
big, that's also a form of disrespect to yourself.
Exactly.
But
So,
Maria Montessori believed that children deserved the freedom when they had developed some powers of control that I guess would include self-respect as well. But I think those words like not yet developed is really, really important
mm,
in that particular quote from The Absorbent Mind, to let the child do as he likes when he has not yet developed any powers of control,
well,
which means they're going to be developed.
yeah, I hear you, and I know you're trying to redirect us to the script, but I want to say because I think this goes with self-respect. I want a little bit more on self-respect because I want to say that
Okay, go ahead and talk about self-respect. I,
no, it occurs to me. I like this idea a lot because when we talk about, I want to tease it because when we talk about they have not yet developed the powers of control. I think that in there is the concept of self-respect. I guess what I'm wanting to convey is that when we give kids either too much freedom or too much rigid structure, we're not enabling them with self-respect. Self-respect is about learning how you treat yourself, others, the environment as you work through that. And as parents, we know that a 2-year-old's ability to perceive that is very different than a 7-year-old's. And so I think when we talk about this idea of portraying the idea of freedom and tying to this idea of self-respect, what we're talking about is understanding that you're trying to help the child progress to a state where they are a fully realized adult human. And that fully realized adult human is filled with self-respect and sees themselves within the society and understands how they fit. And it isn't just self-obsessed or self-critical at all times. And they have developed that, and you've helped guide them there by understanding what their readiness is. And that's what Montessori also teaches.
mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to say about self-respect before we go on?
No.
Okay. All right. We've talked a lot about what the opposite of following the child, could look like, or misinterpretations
Sure.
of it, right? Like it's being too hands off. It's misunderstanding what children actually need from you in order to develop those powers of self-control or
Mm-hmm.
self-respect. It's choosing, and I say this with absolute love and respect for like the hardness that is teaching the Montessori way, like, or really teaching homeschooling in general. Like it's very, very hard. But sometimes parents will avoid giving those lessons
Oh,
because
yes.
it feels hard and there's pressure, and they're like, what if I get it wrong? I need to go and like practice this a million times and study it and prepare. And we emphasize this a lot in the Montessori community, that like you really need to be trained first before you're ready to give a lesson. And this is great because in the larger culture, what do we say to preschool teachers? We say, y'all are just daycare
Oh,
workers.
yeah.
Anyone with maybe a GED can be hired as a daycare worker. You don't have to have a college education. it's like not a hard job. That's what we say. That's like the message that I think a lot of early childcare educators get, is that their work is not valued. They're not paid as much. They
Mm-hmm.
aren't required to have as high of degrees,
Yep.
before getting those
True.
jobs. It's often, I will tell you, it often is minimum wage, here in the United States, that you would be paid as as a child caregiver. And that really does make Montessori special, because when you are Montessori trained, you are putting a lot of care and attention into your craft.
That's true.
And that's something that Montessori training centers really do give to teachers of these very young children. They say, like, not everybody can do what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
What you were doing is very, very special.
Yeah.
And so I think sometimes we tend to overemphasize that in the Montessori community, which on one hand is really wonderful for Montessori teachers
Yeah, because it's a
who are in
counter
a
narrative,
classroom.
right?
But it's not so great for those of you who are homeschooling your kids, because then you receive the message of like, I'm not trained properly. I'm not good enough to do this. I have to study for hours and hours before I can give this one significant lesson. And so what happens is we put our all into that one lesson. We do the work, we prepare, we give the lesson, and then it lasts for like 5-10 minutes and it's done. And here we have spent like, I don't know, hours
Yeah.
preparing for it, and it falls flat. And maybe it falls flat because our child senses like that we want something out of it, or that we've put a lot into it. So like
Yeah.
there's that is troubling. So sometimes parents avoid giving the lessons. And if you're avoiding giving the lessons and you feel like instead you're following your child because you're not giving lessons to your child, then that is a form of that hands-offness that pushes the boundary
Yeah.
of not following the child. You know what I mean? Like,
I
not
do.
to be guilt-inducing or shamey, or or judgy in any way. I've been there so many times. I'm still there so many times with our kids. Things can be intimidating, but if you're leaving things on the table and you're just not doing the work because you're scared to do it, then that could be the source of your problem.
Yeah.
Another way we cannot follow our child, I think, I used to worry about this a lot because our children in particular used to require large amounts of pretend play.
Mm-hmm.
And so so I can speak from experience with this. Like, I have many, many times wondered, like, is 3 days of pretend play in succession enough? Like, when am I supposed to, like, get in with those lessons? Does that mean I need to, if I've allowed them to just make this
They've done puppet theater for
right.
3 days in a
They've done
row.
puppet theater for 3 days in a
When are they going to
row.
do the
Does
math?
that mean like I have to make the next 3 days all about like nonstop lessons in order to make up for it?
Yes.
Like, I mean, it's a hard balance, so I'm not saying it's easy. But if you are not really, really clear on what following the child means to you in your daily practice with your children, then that's not a form of freedom for you or for them. It leads to frustration for both of you. So let's talk very, very specifically about what it means to give your child the freedom that they need with the boundaries that they need in order to have that self-respect, and for you to have that self-respect for yourself as the guide. And it can help you to actually follow your child in real life. All right. And if you are listening out there and this is resonating, I would love to hear in the comments as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So let's just be really clear. Following the child is an active process. It's an active, engaged process. It is not a hands-off approach. It is also not a micromanaging approach. So here are some things that you can do in your real life. You can give your child the freedom of choice.
Yes.
And make that a mainstay of your homeschool. Your child does not always choose what lesson you give to them. That's your choice. You can think of it, you always talk about the meal analogy, right?
Yeah,
like
that's right.
You're setting forth some physical science, some life science, some humankind and geography stuff, and some little reading lessons and some math. You're displaying this all for your
Mhm.
child, except on instead of a plate, it's on your shelf, or it's like just
Mhm.
in your
That's right.
environment. But your child is going to choose what to concentrate on and what to repeat. But
Yeah,
they
it's
don't necessarily get to choose exactly what lessons they're going to get.
Yeah, so it's freedom within limits. And like you were saying earlier, what this is exactly what Maria was saying. Like, what are those limits? What determines the limits? It's the child's readiness. And so the younger the child, the fewer things you're going to put on that plate, and the more control you're going to have over setting that plate. As the child gets older, when your child is in their, let's say, by the time they're into their lower elementary years, you want to give them a lot more freedom to pick the ingredients. But
Hmm.
it's not the grocery store, it's the refrigerator where you've already stocked all the good stuff,
That's right. That's good.
right? So you're going to expand. So the toddler, they get a plate. It's got a few things on it. They eat what they want. You know that whatever they've eaten from that plate, delicious and nutritious. They get older, maybe they can go to the fridge and pick out what they want, but you've stocked that fridge with good stuff.
Yeah,
That's the idea with the curriculum as well. So
that's
you
right.
want to give them a good academic, creative diet, something that's going to be nutritious, and then let them select from those activities based on where they are. And if you're in tune, I love what you just said about
Hmm.
being active because it's so important.
Hmm.
We talked about that a lot when we did the observation series a while back, not very long ago, right? Being observing in the Montessori system is a highly active process. It's not just passively sitting, it's really being engaged. The same thing for following the child, right? You're highly engaged. And when you're really in rhythm with your child, you're going to be able to start to anticipate and you're going to be able to stock that fridge or set that plate in advance of where you know your child is going.
Hmm. Yeah. So, giving your child choice can be as simple as setting some classic Montessori materials or DIY materials on a shelf, showing your child what they do, modeling with them often
Mhm.
so your child sees them being used, and then allowing your child the choice
Yep.
of which one they might want to do. And I also think parents get tripped up because homes have a lot of different kinds of materials. Like we've got stuffies and we've got
Yeah, there's also
Barbie
toys. There's
dolls,
also
right? Like, and so a lot of Montessori homeschooling parents really struggle with like, I want my child to choose what's on the shelf, but they want to choose the Barbies. Is that okay? And that's a personal choice. Like if it's, from my opinion, like it feels unfair to your child if you say you can only play with these toys, like, I don't want you to play with those. Like, those aren't good enough. You can play with these instead. It can cause some discord in your child's mindset, if
yes.
that makes sense. So,
Yes.
there are a few things that parents have done in order to help with that. And I'll just go ahead and tell you since you're watching today. Some parents do create a separate homeschool area of their home.
Yep.
And so their rule is like, when we're in this room, you can choose between all of these things, so you would only put in the room or in that certain area things that you're totally fine with your child engaging with or playing with. And you would say, like, for this, for the next hour, like, we're going to be in here
Yep.
and you can choose anything that's in here. Right. And so that's setting a boundary around it. And if you don't have that specific place,
Hmm.
I would just really be thinking about, like, if there's stuff in your home, you're not fine with your child choosing, maybe it's time to get it out of the home. Like, if you don't feel like your collection of Barbies is educational and has value and is a worthy choice, it shouldn't be in your house. Okay, so,
Yes.
and I feel really strongly about that. Like, we get to choose what is in our children's environment. And if there's not something that's aligned, it's okay to tell relatives or pack it up, put it in a box, and
Mm.
just draw a line with it. And of course, there's going to be challenges with that as well. But that is your choice.
Yeah, and I'm
Right.
going to extend here a little bit. I think the biggest
And I'm
challenge.
not saying that having a collection of Barbies is wrong.
No, right.
Okay. Like maybe it's a
I think it's
totally
your
valid
mind, right? I
choice.
think what you're
Right.
saying is it's your mindset, right? Like if you because you Barbies can be an awesome conduit for creative play,
Mhm.
right? They're just dolls. They're stuffies of another kind, and playing with stuffies or playing with dolls or puppets or things is really really healthy and totally on the mark for the age of your child. You know, if you're watching this show, your child's probably a little guy, and that's awesome. I think where you want to put the line is you have to make the decision how much of the diet do you want to be creative free play with dolls
Mhm.
versus I also want you to do this, read some books with me, or I also want you to do this fun science experiment. So this is where you are giving them freedom of choice
Mhm.
within limits.
Yeah. Yeah, you can use the words before or after. Like,
Yeah.
first, I'm going to give you a lesson, and then you can choose what you'd like to do. Or, how long would you like to work on this? How long do you think the Barbie work will take you? You know,
Mhm.
would you like to work for 20 minutes or 30? I will remind you when it's time for us to do our lesson. And so,
Yeah.
those are all things that I said to our kids when they were little. And it's a way of imbuing them with self respect and showing them that you respect their choices.